Good morning and welcome. I am Bear with BearIndependent.com. Let's do the brief. 6 April 22. Bear Independent brief. This Wednesday, today, it is expected that in coordination with the G7 and the European Union, the United States will announce another, quote, sweeping package of sanction measures that will impose significant costs on Russia and send it further down the road of economic, financial, and technological isolation, end quote. According to a source who also said that, quote, these measures will degrade key instruments of Russian state power, impose acute and immediate economic harm on Russia, and hold accountable the Russian kleptocracy that funds and supports Putin's war, end quote. This package is expected to include the banning of new investment in Russia, as well as a ramping up of sanctions against state-owned enterprises and financial institutions, in addition to direct sanctions against individuals and families involved in the Russian government. Denmark, Italy, Spain, and Sweden are among the most recent countries to expel Russian diplomats on Tuesday, as of yesterday. France and Germany have already done so as of Monday, 2 days ago. I guess we'll take this morning's brief paragraph by paragraph, as we often do. The concern with more sanctions and the further isolation of Russia. Sanctions are not war, if you will. And there's many people who, they're a facet of, they're a tool in the toolkit. There's many people who have decried these sanctions in lieu of direct action. Myself at times in moments of frustration, because they're weak. They're not, or at least the argument is, sanctions are not the type of thing that will deter a man like Vladimir Putin. The thing to understand here, at least from my point of view, there's two. The first is I genuinely believe, based upon their actions, not based upon their words, but based upon their actions, that NATO wants a war in Eastern Europe, and that Ukraine may become the battlefield on which that war is fought, or at least the initial battlefield on which that war is fought. And we've discussed the myriad reasons why I believe that NATO wants a war in Ukraine, really a war with Russia, in previous intel briefs. So that's the first thing. I believe NATO wants a war. The next is isolating Russia, while it seems like a good idea, actually serves to strengthen the relationships they have with their allies. The argument has been made by many analysts that it was a bad move for myriad reasons, but it was a bad move for Putin to invade Ukraine. But one of the reasons that it was a bad move was that NATO was generally weak prior to this action. And now NATO, for better or worse, is being forced to reevaluate its alliances and its capabilities and its TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. What is it going to do in response to this Russian threat? So this action is actually strengthening NATO, while isolating Russia is necessarily forcing Russia to strengthen its alliances, evaluate its TTPs, to withdraw from the global system, if you will. Excuse me. That can make Russia more of a dangerous element, a more dangerous enemy for us, because it increases the level of desperation that the Russian people will experience, and governments around the world, regardless of their method of governance, whether it's socialism or communism or democracy or, representative republic, pick your poison. Governments have to strive to maintain a level of legitimacy with their constituency. If the government loses its legitimacy, They don't maintain the mandate, the social mandate from their constituents in order to be able to govern. And so by exacerbating the issues that the Russian populace is already experiencing through these situations, these sanctions rather, it makes the situation in Russia more dire, which gives Putin even more of a mandate to take action against the West. It makes us more of the bad guy. And as I've shared previously, my concern is now that it seems that both sides, NATO, the West, and Russia, the East, if you will, both sides are actively working through a war of narratives, fifth generation warfare, to achieve that social mandate for more and or the initiation of direct action in Ukraine. What we will see next is the Black Swan event, the casus belli, the reason we have to get involved, whether that's, the sinking of the Lusitania or the assassination of the Archduke Francis Ferdinand or the Gulf of Tonkin incident or Pearl Harbor or 9/11 or whatever you may have. I think that there's a strong probability, I'm not prophesying here, but I think there's a strong possibility that something like that is going to happen next after a critical mass of constituents within the NATO bloc, as the reporting currently likes to use, within the NATO bloc, agrees that yes, we need to go to war. The next thing will be the cause for war. The rhetoric is escalating across the world as more and more reports of atrocities and alleged war crimes are circulating through the media. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke of the horrors being unveiled in places like Bucha after the withdrawal of Russian troops, saying that Russia was conducting a, quote, deliberate campaign to kill, to torture, to rape, and to commit atrocities, end quote. At a UN conference yesterday, the U.S. ambassador brought up what she called, quote, credible reports of Russia's abducting of tens of thousands of Ukrainian civilians, seizing passports, performing interrogations, and forcibly relocating them to Russia. Zelensky also addressed the council, saying the full scope of what Russia has done in Ukraine's cities has yet to be revealed to the rest of the world. He asked for charges of war crimes to be brought against Russian troops, saying that NATO, UN, in this context, the United Nations, must act or dissolve themselves, quote, if there is nothing they can do besides conversation, end quote. And so we have this macro-micro situation going on here, where in the microcosm of Ukraine, within the borders of that country, which is a rather large country, it's approximately the size of Texas. Within the microcosm of Ukraine, there are bad things happening. There is a war happening there. People are getting shelled. People are getting killed. Non-combatants are being murdered. There's a lot of on-the-ground reporting going on. And the challenge there is, from an analysis standpoint, is sifting the wheat from the chaff. Because again, fifth generation warfare, this is in many cases a game of narratives with both sides or multiple sides trying to control the narrative. We've seen this from day one with Zelensky, the way he talks, what he wears when he talks, the messaging that he's putting out internally to his people and externally to the entire globe, versus the messaging from Putin and Medvedev, versus the messaging from Blinken and Biden in the United States. Even dovetails into the way China has responded to this, and then tertiary reactions from countries like India. There's a lot going on here, and it's very much so a game of narratives. And the idea here is to gain that mandate from the constituency for action, which is why you see things like Zelensky here saying, listen, if all you're going to do is talk, you might as well dissolve yourselves, because talk is cheap and we need action. And in that microcosm, they do. Bad things are happening in Ukraine. The question becomes, if we, NATO, the UN, whoever, both of which are largely comprised of the United States, our military assets, and our funding, if we get involved in that war, to what end? Some have already been whispering about possible regime change in Russia. Best of luck with that. I don't think that would be something that is achievable in the short term, maybe the long term. I believe that Russia's goal is to remove Zelensky and install leadership in Ukraine that is copacetic to Russia's ambitions in the area, and or co-opt Zelensky, bring him back into the fold so that he will play ball with Russia, not with the West, not with NATO, not with the European Union. Russia's primary concern thus far, at least their onus for action, their messaging, has been the violation of the Minsk agreement by Ukraine. And they do not want NATO allies on their border. Yes and no. Large-scale, third-generation warfare of conventional war, tanks and planes and bombs and guns, that makes a lot of sense. I don't want my enemy right up at my mailbox, right? I don't want them right next door. That makes sense. But with the proliferation of high-technology weapons, it really doesn't matter if they're right next door or not. I mean, the United States has the capability to wipe any country we want off the face of the earth from halfway around the globe and or from space. And other countries are developing these technologies as well. You know, China, hypersonic missiles, so forth and so on. And so the idea that I don't want you right next door to me is valid, but it's not totally valid as a casus belli, as a reason for action for Russia to come across the Ukrainian border and into Ukraine. I think there's something much deeper going on here. Ultimately, it comes back to resources. I believe that we are going into a period of scarcity and resources are drying up, and getting back to the idea of governments have to maintain legitimacy in order to govern their people. A big part of maintaining legitimacy is being able to feed and provide for your people, whatever that might look like. We've seen global supply chain issues emerging just from this war, which started February 24th. So we're, 7 weeks, not even 8 weeks into this war as of yet. And already roughly 1/3 of the world's wheat crop for this year has been removed from the global inventory because of this war in Ukraine. And Ukraine produces a lot of food. Ukraine has a large military-industrial complex, if you will, huge manufacturing and industrial interests in Ukraine. IT, fourth in the world in IT. They have a space program. And they were at one point a part of the Soviet Union. And Putin is on record as saying he essentially wants to recreate the Soviet Union. And so bringing Ukraine back into the fold is very good for him for a lot of reasons, because it gives him access to those resources. Additionally, the occupation of the Crimean Peninsula by Russian forces, which Ukraine responded by cutting off the flow of water into the Crimea, was one of the reasons that we saw little green men, essentially Russian soldiers without patches on their uniforms, occupying Luhansk and Donetsk and performing unconventional warfare, raising an auxiliary, basically a guerrilla force within the DNR and LNR to oppose the Ukrainian governance, to destabilize and remove their legitimacy. So there's talks of right now of Zelensky and Putin getting together and essentially Zelensky conceding Crimea, the DNR, and the LNR to Russia. Now, other analysts are saying, and I would recommend you see Forward Observer for this, but other analysts are saying that there's a possibility that the withdrawal that we're seeing from Kiev and other areas in the north of Ukraine is actually a repositioning of troops, and that there will be an attack from the east moving westward into Ukraine by the Russians to take and hold the Crimea, which they already have. And by the way, to the southwest of Ukraine is Moldova, which is a puppet state of Russia. To take and hold Crimea, the DNR and the LNR, the Luhansk and Donetsk regions, the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics, DNR and LNR. and then possibly go as far as the Dnieper River, which is, we were talking about 2 months ago, taking hold to the Dnieper River. We'll see. Nobody really knows at this point, but May 9th is a significant date for the Russians. It's like Russian Victory Day. It's kind of like D-Day for the Americans, right? And so there's a chance that Vladimir Putin could mobilize his troops and send them in with the goal of having completed that portion of the assault on Ukraine by 9 May to be able to announce victory in that regard. When the Russian representative addressed the UN, he claimed that alleged atrocities were, quote, blatant criminally staged events. Now, this is the Russians talking about what happened in Bucha. He claimed that they were, quote, blatantly criminally staged events with Ukrainian civilians who were killed by their own radicals, end quote. In other words, this was staged by the Ukrainians to make it look like the Russians committed atrocities. Other statements he made included, quote, you couldn't ignore the flagrant inconsistencies in the version of events which are being promoted by Ukrainian and Western media, end quote. And, quote, we are not acting like the Americans and their allies in Iraq and Syria, razing entire cities to the ground, end quote, referring to great pity and care not to shoot civilians as to the reason that they were advancing so slowly. As the rhetoric escalates and the outrage increases across the world, officials believe that Russia is preparing to launch an offensive in the southeast of Ukraine. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg said, quote, Moscow is not giving up its ambitions in Ukraine. We expect a further push in the eastern and southern Ukraine to try and take the entire Donbas and create a land bridge to the Crimean Peninsula, end quote. Americans and the rest of the world are relearning some lessons that we had forgotten since World War II right now. One of those lessons is that war over there absolutely can affect our home condition over here. Wasn't really the case with GWOT, Global War on Terror. Certainly wasn't the case with the Iraq War, Operation Desert Storm. Perhaps the last time there were issues like this from a global conflict for the United States was perhaps the Vietnam War, but certainly World War II. Because of the increase in globalization since then, the interdependency across national lines globally, things are getting weird now. We've talked at length about food shortages. We have presidents and world leaders around the world openly admitting there's going to be food shortages. Now, what does that mean for you as the preparedness-minded individual, as the prepper, as the survivalist, as the whatever, right? You need to be stacking food while you still can. I just recently priced salt. You used to be able to get Morton's table salt for $1 in the can, 25.6 ounces, I believe, for $1. I found it 3 for $12 yesterday. That's a 400% increase. 50-pound bags of salt were $10 to $12. 25-pound bags of salt are now $23. Wheat, forget it, wheat and flour going through the roof. Corn, there's many farmers this year because of a lack of fertilizer, because corn is a very high nitrogen feeder, because of a lack of fertilizer, are planting beans rather than corn. Well, in America, cattle is finished on corn, generally speaking, so your beef prices are going to go up. High fructose corn syrup is in everything that comes in a box or a bag from the grocery store. It's going to be an issue. You add into that fuel costs, which are going up exponentially, and there's very little chance of actual relief there, regardless of whether or not we pull oil from our strategic oil reserves, strategic petroleum reserves, the SPR, which is not what they're for. The SPR is for fighting wars and for protecting our country. It's not for easing gas prices because of poor national leadership. But even if the SPR releases a whole bunch of oil. Prices are not going to come down anytime soon. So things are going to get more expensive. You couple that with the destabilization of this global system, the dollar is losing its purchasing power. All this to say, and I've said previously, I believe the window of opportunity for people to get prepared is closing. And I am not a prepper apologist. I'm not here to talk you into whether or not you should be preparing. I'm working off the basic assumption that you know that you should be. And if you don't think that you should be, this probably isn't the channel for you. And that's okay. There's lots of other, you can watch kittens playing with yarn on YouTube all you want. But the window of opportunity for us to take this seriously, not just to buy food and stack it to the rafters, stockpile material goods, but to be able to produce food, produce material goods, and become as independent from this broken, fragile system as possible, that window of opportunity, I believe, is closing. And I think it will become further exacerbated if NATO becomes embroiled in a war with Russia. And NATO is not exclusively the United States, but it is very much so the United States. And so the question really for you is, what are you doing tangible every day in your life to become more separate from this broken, fragile system? Mike Shelby, Forward Observer, was talking about, I believe it was yesterday, on his Out Front with Mike Shelby. He was talking about, somebody said to him, you know, I think I'm as prepared as I can be. And he was talking about a basic tenet of warfare is to constantly improve your position. And he's absolutely right. It never stops. It never stops. You can always be better than you are. And that can be, at times, exhausting. And if you find yourself a bit overwhelmed, you need to zoom out or zoom in from the macro picture to the micro. What can I do in my daily life? Not what is Putin gonna do? What is Biden gonna do? What is Jen Stoltenberg gonna do? What is Xi gonna do? What can I do? Okay? Don't let these world leaders drive the bus for you. You get to drive your own bus. This is, with freedom comes responsibility. And we freedom-loving Americans, many of us have forgotten how to take personal responsibility. And this is an opportunity for us to remember how to take personal responsibility and then to do those things. All right. If you're one of those people that jumps off when we talk about how to support the show, this is your clue. Beat feet, skedaddle, have a blessed day. Get out of here. Okay, for everybody else, thank you for supporting the show. If you're here on YouTube, the best way to support the show is to click the subscribe button, ring the little bell icon, and then share this with somebody you think needs to see it. That helps us greatly. Also, leaving comments in the comments section down below helps us in the YouTube algorithm, which is not friendly towards people like me who talk about world events, read their Bible and do what it says, and roll around with DMR rifles on their four-wheelers. So that helps us. Patreon.com. $5 a month. Go to patreon.com and search for Bear Independent, or there is a link in the description in every video. It's $5 a month, and it's not an I love me, you should love me too channel. There's over 2,000 exclusive pieces of content on Patreon. There's 4 to 6 exclusive posts per week on Patreon. Yesterday, we were talking about fighting stance. How do you stand? What does that look like? Whether we're fist fighting or knife fighting or pistol fighting or rifle fighting. How does all that matter? Had that conversation yesterday. And then this morning, we're talking about growing food in regards to a greenhouse, which I think is going to be very important for all of us going forward. Getting back to practical, tactical, actionable information that you can onboard so that you can be better prepared for what's coming. So thank you to all the patrons. You are the economic engine of the Bear Nation, and I am deeply appreciative of you. Next, Refuge Medical. I own Refuge Medical. This, see that? This is me and people I love, a whole bunch of them. Refuge Medical, we make the best first aid kits on the planet, bar none. Handmade, made in America, guaranteed forever. 36 lives saved. 36. Most recent life saved was in New Hampshire, 3-car pileup. The responder had a bare minimum kit in her vehicle. She was able to apply a tourniquet and a trauma bandage to stop an arterial bleed to the leg and keep the patient, the casualty, awake and alert and engaged until police arrived. By the way, the law enforcement officers, as much as I love y'all, you're not EMS and you know it, but a lot of other people don't. There's a crazy expectation from civilians that the law enforcement, when they arrive, they're going to fix everything. Not if it's a serious acute medical issue. That's what EMS is for. So, law enforcement got there, and then EMS arrived, and then the casualty was transported to the hospital where she, the casualty, is making a full recovery from her injuries. However, had a tourniquet not been applied to this person, you have 90 to maybe 120 seconds of an uncontrolled femoral bleed before you enter into irreversible hypovolemic shock, aka you begin the process of dying. And it's called irreversible for a reason. At that point, it doesn't matter if we get more blood into you. It doesn't matter if we get you into a surgical suite. Your organs have already started to shut down and you're gonna die. And so this person, this responder, saved this casualty's life using a tourniquet in a motor vehicle accident in a 3-car pileup in New Hampshire. You're awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And we will be replacing every bit of kit that she used to save that person's life, as we always do at Refuge Medical. So briefly, this is the SOB Kit. It's designed to be worn on a war belt, but it also works great on a plate carrier. It also works great on the back of a headrest. Cat Gen 7 tourniquet on the outside, internal pouch. You pull this pouch out. You're now holding a purpose-built trauma kit in your hands. This one is wet, which is totally okay for it because it's been pouring rain out here, and it doesn't matter if you get it wet because all this stuff is vacuum sealed inside of here. So you've got a pressure bandage, you've got quick clot, you've got duct tape, nasopharyngeal airway, and 2 compact chest seals, a pair of gloves, a Sharpie, duct tape, compressed gauze for wound packing. Good to go. That's the SOB kit. And again, see that right there? Made in the USA. Next, we'll talk about the Bear Fac. Oh, by the way, your promo code is Bear Nation, and that gets you free shipping on everything Bear Nation. 1 word or 2 words, because some of y'all have struggled with that, so it works either way. RefugeMedical.com. Gen 3 Bear Fac vastly exceeds the capabilities of the individual first aid kit issued to our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines by a lot. On 4 continents electively with all branches of the U.S. Armed Forces. 36 lives saved. I've got a soft T tourniquet turreted onto, shot corded onto this side. I've got a set of shears, North American Rescue on this side. Inside of here, you pop this open, pull the red handle. You're seeing a trend here. The inner comes out of the outer. One-handed deployment. Tourniquet, pressure dressing, tape, Sharpie. My stack in the back for my airway and respiratory. Hyphen chest seals. 5x9 gauze pads. Burn tech dressings, nasopharyngeal airway, and a set of shears. That's my airway and respiratory module. Massive bleeding, airway and respiratory. Then down here, we've got our circulation, head injury, hypothermia, and everything else. And so I've got quick clot, rolled gauze for wound packing. And then I've got the trauma pack, compressed gauze, triangle bandage, rolled gauze, emergency survival blanket, 2x2s, 4x4s, 5x9s, iPad, or eye shield as well, fold flat duct tape, and myriad other things that are inside of here. This is not a boo-boo kit. This is not a Susie crashed her bike and needs a Band-Aid kit. This is a you're bleeding and gonna die kit. We don't make, well, we do. We have a boo-boo kit at refugemedical.com if you need Band-Aids. But that is not the main thrust of our efforts. We're here to save people's lives. And I sympathize with Susie and her skinned knee. And it's going to be okay, Susie. We love you. It's going to be okay. Please stop crying. Please stop crying. Here's a Moana Band-Aid. That's not what this is. This is not a Moana Band-Aid. This is a save your life because you could die kit made in America. Now, lastly, what I wanted to show you, because a lot of y'all have been asking, is this. This is my crash kit. This one's mine. And as you can see, it's been on the back of this four-wheeler for almost a year and a half. It's in a genuine Pelican case. Pelican 1500. Water, dirt, whatever, don't matter. And these are designed, this is a great vehicle kit. Mine is special. I have some different things in here than what you'll get at the store because I'm me and I own the damn company. But these are designed, crash kit right here, okay? These are designed for your vehicle, for off-roading, for 4x4. These were put together in conjunction with our buddy Devin. And Devin works for a race team that does Baja racing. And they needed a kit for their race trucks that could deal with crash injuries, burn injuries, trauma injuries, crushing injuries, exposure, dehydration, all of the above. And it had to be waterproof, and it had to be dirt and dust proof. And so we came up with the crash kit. And so if it's good enough for Baja racing, it's good enough for your Jeep or your minivan or your helicopter or whatever you have. And so the whole idea behind the crash kit is it treats all of those injuries that I just listed. And they're absolutely badass. They're in Pelican cases. Also great, they'll float. They're great for your boat. They're, again, waterproof, windproof, dustproof, sand-proof, mud-proof, life-proof, the crash kit. And so these are in stock and shipping quick. And if you have an application like that, check them out at refugemedical.com. I appreciate y'all. I really do. And my encouragement to y'all is always, hey, go do the things. Stay busy doing things that matter and don't worry about the things that don't. Fear is of the enemy and worrying is a sin. Okay? Do productive things. You can have concerns. I have concerns. But if you find yourself overwhelmed with fear or overwhelmed with worry, we're actually taking away from the Father's capabilities to operate in our life when we think and act that way. So you give those things over to the Father, and then you concern yourself with the things that you can do to be productive. One foot in front of the other. My old man, before he passed, used to say to me, son, you can do anything you want to do. It just takes one word. Start. So my exhortation for you today is start. In honor of my old man, start. Bless y'all. Shalom.